What's up everyone, welcome back to another episode. In today's video we'll be working on the S4. I know it's been a while, so I definitely owe you guys an update. A lot has changed mechanically, and I just wanted to make sure that all of that was sorted out before we try to get this thing inspected and on the dyno. So we've got quite a few items that we want to take care of. So A, we want to make sure all the items for the inspection are good to go. B, we want to make sure that we install a new fuel level sender and gauge. It's been pretty difficult not knowing how much fuel is in the cell on this car. And then C, we'll be doing some street tuning to get this thing better prepared for the dyno. For those of you guys who aren't familiar with this car, it is a 1993 Audi S4. We are doing some sort of tribute / throwback build to the early 90s Super Touring cars from that generation. So we will be doing like a full livery and all of that. But we're at the point where we just need to make sure everything is good to go mechanically, and we dyno tune it and just have a good foundation. So with all of that out of the way, let's check out the items on the list and get started. All right, so here's our list of items. The highest priority for me is installing the fuel level sender and gauge. We'll also add some bracing back there and sound deadening. Next, we'll do a boost leak test and install EBC. We'll also change the oil and torque the wheels. If we have time, we'll also install some new spark plugs, but we'll definitely want to do that the day of the dyno. Up next, we'll install this VDO fuel gauge. I went with this just because it matches my existing voltmeter gauge, and in general, I like these gauges because they're super simple and easy to read. This will work with pretty much any aftermarket style fuel sender where you have a 240 ohm output at an empty tank and a 33 ohm output at a full tank. And on the back, the wiring should be really easy. We just have a positive ground, same for the light, and then the signal wire right here. So let's just get the wiring set up first and then we'll install it. So we'll go with yellow for our signal, go with red for our positive connection, and then green for our ground. Alright, so we have our gauge secured, we have it tightened from the back. The only thing we have left is to run the signal wire, but before we do that, let's just test it out and make sure it works. Nice. So I can see it's reading empty. We have our red backlighting just like our voltmeter. So yeah, everything seems to be good. Alright, and here we have our sender wire right here. So we'll have to cut a hole on that top plate as well as bore out the foam so we can install our sender. But as far as hiding the wire, I think we did a pretty good job. You could pretty much only tell right here in this section. Over here you can't really tell anything. So I'd say that part is good to go. Now comes the fun part. Like I said, we're gonna have to uninstall that top plate. We're gonna have to drill a hole and then we'll have to bore out the foam. But first I'm just gonna empty out this can. I don't think there's much left, but yeah, let's get to it. So here's the sender for our fuel gauge. I got this on Amazon. I think it was around 50 bucks. The length of the probe is actually really important. It should be about 1/2 inch to 1 inch less than the depth of your tank. So this cell in the back of the Audi is 6.5 inches, so this is 1 inch less than that. And as you can see, it has the plate on top with the gasket. As far as how this works, from what I understand on this probe, there's a bunch of what are called reed switches, which I believe are some sort of magnetic contacts. So as this thing rises, there's a magnet in here that activates each switch. So I don't know how many there are along this, but however many there are as it rises, that's when you know it's full. And then as it goes down, you know that it's empty. So the range is basically, the output is a resistance 240 ohms to 33 ohms. Alright, so as you can see, we're seeing about 35 ohms when it should be full. This is upside down. And then when it's empty, you should see about 240. Nice, we're seeing 244. So it looks like this thing should be good to install. And here we have our sender wired up. I am going to clean this up once we verify that it works. Alright, sweet. Well, we are seeing about a half tank of fuel. That's awesome. So it seems like our install worked out. So the next thing I want to do is install our EBC. So we'll be going with a MAC valve like you could see here. And I think what we'll do is mount it here. This seems like we're kind of away from the heat from the exhaust manifold, but we're close enough to the wastegate and also close to run wires to the ECU. Alright, so now we have our two wires that are running back into the car. For these solenoids, the polarity doesn't matter. So we'll have one wire connected to 12 volts when the ignition is on, and then we'll have the other connected to a pulsed output from the ECU. For our fittings, we are going to use 1/8 NPT to barb adapters on this. My port 1, which is the right side of this solenoid right here, is going to be connected to a T-fitting coming off the pressure source, and the other side of that's going to go to the bottom port on the wastegate. And then port 3, which is the middle one, is going to have a filter, and then port 2 is going to go to the top port on the wastegate. Everything here is looking good. We have our vacuum lines right over here. We have our electrical wires going back into the car. Again, we have one of those connected to a 12 volt source, and then the other is a pulsed ground output from the ECU, which is what we're configuring right now. So right now I have my boost duty cycle at 0 everywhere, and we want to basically tune the car on the wastegate spring first, and then we'll adjust the duty cycle. But just to make sure this is actually working, I'm going to go to our output config. Right now we're using our GPO out 1 as our boost solenoid. So we're going to test that, and then we should hear this thing click. That should be good. I just pressed it 3 times and I heard it click. So I believe this thing should be good to go. We'll be able to tell on the dyno. As of now, we'll just monitor and make sure that the boost is basically staying at our wastegate spring and we're not seeing anything more than that. We do also have our boost limits and all of that set up just in case we do overboost. Alright, so before we move on to our next item, I did end up changing up this setup. I felt like the EBC being over there was just like way too close to the exhaust and way too visible. This is a little bit more subdued. I like this a lot better. So now we'll move on to doing a boost leak test. So what we're going to do is take off the intake and then connect our compressor to this pipe right here. And we're going to pressurize the whole system, and we'll get a spray bottle and check to see if we have any leaks. Seems like the blow-off valve is leaky, so let's investigate that. So the last thing that I want to do before our inspection is an oil change. Hasn't been changed in a while. Want to get that done. We'll save our spark plug change for the day before the dyno. But let's just knock this oil change out real quick, and then we can do our inspection tomorrow. All right, it's the next day. We're about to go to the inspection. Wish me luck. All right, guys, well, it is later that day. The car did pass its inspection, which is awesome. I did register the car, so everything's completely legal. Just going to continue to do a little bit more street tune-in just to get the fuel dialed in and do some more dyno prep, but this car is pretty much good to go. Here is the exterior. It's a little rough. Still waiting on the new bumper to come in. It needs a wash really badly, and as you can see, some trim and all that still needs to go on. From a previous video, you could see that we wrapped the trunk and got that squared away. But let's go inside and check out what we've done. So lots of changes under the hood. We basically ripped out our OEM hydraulic braking system and converted to a more conventional vacuum setup. We also deleted the ABS in the process, and we have a valve over here to adjust the bias to the rear. We also grabbed a Toyota MR2 electric power steering pump and plumbed that in. So we pretty much changed the steering and the braking, two pretty big components. So we've been just working that out. I also cleaned up the catch can. It's now over here. It's a lot cleaner. And also installed this Mac solenoid to modulate the wastegate, so we'll now have electronic boost control. That's pretty much everything that changed under the hood. Let's go into the back and check out the fuel cell. So back here we added some bracing for our fuel cell. It wasn't going to move anyways, but figured it'd just be good to have. We also cleaned up our battery box, cleaned up our lines, added a fuel pressure gauge, changed up the fuel filter, and updated the lines for this surge tank. So everything back here should be good to go. We also installed a fuel level sender, which we accomplished at the beginning of this episode, but that's been working great, so I'm really happy to have that. And that pretty much brings us up to date with the car. Like I said, mechanically, it feels pretty well sorted. I've been really happy driving it. The tune is coming along really nicely. I think at this stage it's pretty much time to start focusing on the exterior and bringing it to the dyno just to see what kind of numbers she puts out. For the dyno, we are going to see what we put out. I'm hoping to see somewhere around 350 to the wheels. This is a pretty tired motor. I'm sure it's got over 200,000 miles on it and it's never been opened up. So I don't want to get my expectations too high, but at the same time I'm definitely taking you guys along with me as we bring it to the dyno and tune it on our max ECU. Like I said, I've been doing a lot of driving and just getting the fuel pretty dialed in. We'll really focus on the boost and ignition timing when we do get to the dyno. Alright guys, and that is going to do it for today's episode. I feel pretty confident about this car in terms of bringing it to the dyno now. I feel like we've sorted out a lot of the loose ends. It feels pretty good mechanically. Like I said, I've been enjoying driving it and getting the tune dialed in. So I'll be really curious to see what kind of numbers it puts down on the dyno. But let me know what you guys think of the car so far. Like I said, in the future we'll probably focus a little bit more on the exterior and getting it looking right, and we'll go from there. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out.